Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Remember, if you love film, gaming, or television content, please consider clicking that subscribe button because today I'm going to hit you with a game review for Star Wars Jedi Survivor. So, let's get into it. Obviously, this will come with full spoilers. It's quite a bit removed since the game came out, so I think we're safe to talk spoilers here, but you have been warned just in case you're playing through the game right now. So just a quick note on the previous game. I did enjoy Star Wars Fallen Order. It was a decent game that I think had some mixed elements that could have been fleshed out more. I think the story was fairly weak overall, relying on one big cameo at the end of that game to bring it home. That just didn't do it for me, and the final note just felt pretty underwhelming overall and what turned out to be quite a forgettable story. However, I found the gameplay to be extremely engaging, and going for the platinum for that game was such a fun experience. The first thing that we have to talk about here for Jedi Survivor is the bugs. It has been a big talking point around this game, and I'm not someone who gets too fussy when it comes to frame rates or anything like that. I'm happy to play a game at 30 frames per second as long as it's running fairly well, and that really does it for me. I'm not some kind of snob who needs it to be at 60 FPS constantly to think that it's a good game. As long as it's got good bones in there and runs at a frame rate that isn't completely jarring and unplayable, I'm quite happy. So that should tell you that it's quite an issue that I found the frame rate here to be kind of annoying in this game. It just dips so many times, and there's just a general kind of bugginess surrounding this game. There's a lot of glitches, a lot of pop-in. It just doesn't work a whole lot of the time. Also, another real disappointing thing here is that this game is 155 gigabytes. It is the largest game that I have on my console right now, which is a console that right now has Final Fantasy 16 and Diablo 4 installed, both massive games. But this one is almost double the size of those, and I can't really see why. The excuse is that they wanted to make a lot of the environments 4K and look really sharp, and that's why it uses so much gigabytes on your console. To me, that feels like a bit of a bullshit excuse because the environments aren't that crystal clear. I've played God of War, I'm playing Final Fantasy 16, I'm playing Diablo 4, and Star Wars Jedi Survivor isn't the most detailed game that I've played. It isn't the biggest either in terms of its open world, so I don't really understand why it is that large. To me, that is kind of inexcusable. Now, with all those bugs, it's definitely going to drop the score for my opinion of the game because it did affect it at points, but it doesn't completely destroy the experience for me. There's a lot of good here that I'm going to be talking about. First of which, I think the story is a massive improvement over the last. Instead of relying on a Darth Vader cameo at the end of Fallen Order, this one actually wants to explore the characters a lot more. Cal Kestis is dealing with this internal struggle of dealing with the light side of the Force and maybe embracing that darkness. And it does that in gameplay too, which I really enjoyed. And instead of relying on that cameo, we're seeing this conflict play out, as well as a very great betrayal that plays out from Bode, who is introduced into this game. The betrayal from Bode I never saw coming. It was just really well handled. I really liked the character, and then he became this really compelling villain. So hats off to them for really making the story seem a lot more interesting and compelling than before. There are moments though, like the first one, where this falls into forgettable territory with the story, especially in the middle of the game and exploring a lot of the stuff with Dagan Gera. Sure, I think of it now because I'm right now hardcore in a platinum run for this. I'm just knocking off couple of the last trophies and then I'm done. But once I'm completely removed from this game, about a year or so from now, I'm not going to be thinking about Dagan Gera when it comes to this game. A lot of the stuff with him was just kind of uninteresting and felt really safe, which is what Fallen Order fell into a lot of the time. The side characters are a lot more interesting too. Seer, who I thought was boring in Fallen Order, is a lot more interesting here. Merrin is a great love interest for Cal now, although her voice acting is a little bit subpar, I think, a lot of the time. I think it's more of a creative choice, but it just doesn't work for me personally. And Grease is always a ton of fun, and he is here. Now let's get into the gameplay, which I think is overall quite fun, although there are flaws that I will be pointing out. Firstly, this is a lot more of a bigger world. This is practically an open world game, and I think it does it fairly well. The world has a lot of hidden paths and a lot of hidden areas that I think are really cool when you discover them for the first time. There are plenty of things to find in this world. There are side activities, which can be mostly underwhelming and more just filler stuff, but they do pad out the game nicely enough. The combat is kind of a mixed bag. It is mostly good. There's way more options. They're a lot more ambitious with it here, with like 5 or 6 different stances, which all feel completely different. And this game wants to emphasize a lot more on the platforming elements, which once again can help the game and hurt the game at times. When you're doing a lot of those force tears, the platforming challenges in those are a fucking nightmare. They're just absolutely terrible because the game doesn't feel like it was made to be that tight with its platforming. And when it forces you into that, it can be very frustrating. But just in a general sense, the platforming elements are fun and they're nice enough. The combat, as I said before, is quite ambitious. There are a lot more elements with 5 or 6 different stances that vary the gameplay quite a bit. But there are times where it's quite janky. I feel like there's some kind of input delay at times because you'll be in the middle of a boss fight, you'll push a button, he'll follow through with that, you'll be pushing another button and he doesn't follow up on that second one, which can be very frustrating when some of the bosses require a lot of quick thinking from you. And it's a shame when you're dying because you're pushing the right buttons and you're timing it brilliantly, but Kel just doesn't want to do it. And then he gets one shot by, for example, the boss fight in the Force Tear, where he just sticks out his tongue, grabs you, and you're dead. There are many times I died even though I'm hitting dodge and it's just not going, which was very, very frustrating a lot of the time. And comparing that with a game like Final Fantasy 16, which I'm playing now, where you can change things on the fly, it's very dynamic, and it just does what you push. Star Wars just doesn't want to do that a lot of the time, and it can be very frustrating when the game is asking a lot from you at times. Another thing that this game wants to expand upon are the customization options. There's so many here, and I really like that option. Instead of going to what a lot of games are doing now, where they hide a lot of the stuff behind a paywall, which I think is bullshit a lot of the time, you can actually earn it in-game, which is something that is kind of dying off, and it's a bit of a shame because I think it's a nice cherry on top for games like this that want to explore different customization options and make the character your own. Spider-Man did it well, and so did this, and I'm really glad that it's here. Now, let's talk about the graphics. I mean, they're solid, and that's really it. It looks pretty much on par with the last one. It has moments where it looks great, but I think at times the art direction can be a little bit spotty. For example, Kobo, the main planet that you're going to be visiting, it's very bland a lot of the time. There are a couple of areas that are very expressive, but they're kind of short-lived. The main area that you'll be spending most of your time on is a lot of just yellow and brown, and it just doesn't look that great. It looks very muddy, and it doesn't help when there's a lot of popping in the surrounding area. It just doesn't look as great as what it could. And I really think sometimes these developers are bullshitting when they're like, this game can only be next gen, only a PS5 can handle this, the PS4 can't, or something like that. It's just rubbish because there's games that look far better than this on the last generation of consoles. Overall, Star Wars Jedi Survivor is a great game that I'm happy to recommend to you. There is a lot in here. I'm still playing this with the latest patch and everything, and it's still very buggy. So depending on how you feel about that, that's up to you and your kind of reasoning as to why you buy a game. But for me, I can kind of ignore it, even though it does bring the game's score down a little bit. I'm going to give this game an 8 out of 10 because I think it is great, and it's practically on the same level of quality as the first one. Maybe a tad better, but I don't think it's my game of the year. And by the end of the year, I don't know if it'll make the top 5, but it surely would be in a top 10. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Tell me in the comments below what you think of Jedi Survivor. Do you think it's better than the last game or not? Please let me know. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.